I'm Tim, guitar player, teacher. In the last video, we talked about and started building major scales. If you are unfamiliar with the major scales, I highly recommend going back and watching that video before going through this one. We ended up with lots of different major scales, each having a very specific group of notes. Some using sharps, some using flats. These scales need to be memorized because they are the backbone of virtually everything else we will learn about music theory. But what do we actually need to memorize? We know that each scale will begin on whatever the name of the scale is. That couldn't be easier. A D scale will start on D, an E flat scale will start on E flat. Also remember, the letters for each scale have to follow the alphabet. So as long as we know the alphabet, which we certainly should, that's pretty easy too. The part that we really need to deal with memorizing is the sharps or flats used in each scale. And if you haven't noticed yet, we never use both sharps and flats in the same major scale, and each scale has a different number of sharps or flats. So there is only one scale that uses one sharp. There's only one scale that uses two sharps. There's only one scale that uses four flats, etc. So if we know the sharps or flats for any scale, we can easily put together the list of notes for that scale by simply following the alphabet and adding the accidentals as we go through the letters. Now, if we take these scales and organize them, we can create a tool to help us remember, or at least figure out more quickly, which accidentals are supposed to go in each scale. We'll start in the middle with the C scale. Since it has no sharps or flats, we'll put a 0 under it. For the scales that use sharps, we'll put them in the order by how many sharps are used in each one. So next to the C, we'll have the scale that has one sharp, G. That sharp was applied to F. Remember the seventh note, so I'll put an F under the 1 to remind us to put the sharp on that note. Next was the D scale with two sharps. Remember, when we made this scale, we kept the sharp that was already on F and added the new one to C, again the seventh note. So under D, I'll put a 2 for the number of sharps, and a C because that's where the new sharp goes. As we continue to fill in all of the scales that use sharps, we end up with 7 being the highest number for the C sharp scale. Remember, we really want to avoid using any double sharps. I'll jump ahead a little bit and do the exact same thing with the scales that use flats. We end up with this completed line that shows all of the sharps or flats for any major scale. There are a total of 15 of them. 7 that use sharps, 7 that use flats, and 1 that doesn't use either of them. And now, anytime we need to know what notes are in any of our major scales, this tool makes it much easier and quicker to figure out. So if I want to build an E major scale, I immediately know the letters are going to be E, F, G, A, B, C, D, and E, because E is the tonic of an E major scale, and I have to follow the alphabet from there. All I need to know now is which sharps or flats I will need to add. Under the E, I see it uses 4 sharps, and those sharps need to be on F, C, G, and D. So the E major scale is E, F sharp, G sharp, A, B, C sharp, D sharp, and E. Let's look at another example. D flat. I know the letters are going to be D, E, F, G, A, B, C, and D. The line tells me I will need to use 5 flats on B, E, A, D, and G. So the D flat major scale is D flat, E flat, F, G flat, A flat, B flat, C, and D flat. While there is nothing wrong with using the major scale formula to find the notes of each scale, it is both easier and quicker to simply focus on the accidentals for each scale. That is the entire purpose of this line. Focusing on the accidentals will make memorizing them much easier as well. And like everything else, practice and repetition are the best ways to memorize anything. So you should test yourself by simply picking one and see if you can figure it out. At first with, and then eventually without having to look at this line. Now you may have heard or seen at some point a song is said to be in the key of something. This is just another way of saying the song uses that major scale. A song in the key of D major uses the D major scale. A song in the key of E flat uses the E flat major scale. While sometimes the name of the piece will tell you the key of the song, this is not always the case. However, there is a way that a piece of music will tell you which key it will be in regardless of the title. It is called the key signature. The key signature is found at the beginning of every line of the piece. It is basically the accidentals that are found within that major scale. So if a piece of music uses the A major scale or is in the key of A major, the 3 sharps found in that major scale must be written at the beginning of every line of music within that piece. Recognizing that there are 3 sharps in the piece tells us specifically that we will be using the A major scale to play this piece of music. This means that every F, C, and G within this piece must be played as F sharp, C sharp, and G sharp. Within the piece of music, those sharps will not be added to the notes as we see them. We must just remember that we're using that major scale, so those notes must be adjusted. They also must be written in the order that they were added as we go through the scales. So the F would be written first, then the C, then the G. It is important to point out that not only do the sharps or flats have to be written in the order that they were added, they also must be written in these exact places. The idea is that we want to avoid writing any of them outside of the staff. However, there are a couple of exceptions based on the clef we're reading. For example, the G sharp on the treble clef is written above the staff, while the F flat on the bass clef is written below the staff. There are a few easy ways to recognize each of the key signatures apart from simply knowing them. Remember, when we were building each of the scales that use sharps, it was the 7th note that was receiving the new sharp. For the G scale, it was F. For the D scale, it was C. Since we must write the key signature in the order that these sharps were added, the last sharp written will always be on the 7th note of the scale. So if the last sharp is on F, we're using the G major scale. If the last sharp is on D, then we'll be using the E major scale. This makes recognizing the key signatures quite a bit easier. Unfortunately, the keys that use flats are a little more complicated, but not much. Instead of using the last sharp to figure out the key, for the flats, it's the second to the last flat, and this flat is actually on the name of the key. This doesn't help with F because there's only one flat, but if we look at B flat, we have 2 flats, B flat and E flat, so the B flat tells us the key. For A flat, we have 4 flats, B flat, E flat, A flat, and D flat. Again, it's the second to the last one, in this case A flat. And remember, these flats must be written in the order that they are added as we work away from the C scale. Otherwise, this trick won't work. Now, while these little tricks can help us identify the key signature more quickly, we still need to know all of the notes that make up that scale, not just the name of it. So repetitive practicing, reading, writing, and playing are all still very necessary. So that's how music tells us what major key we're in. However, not all songs are written in a major key. There are also minor keys that we must deal with. And just like the major scales gave us our major keys, minor keys must also start with understanding the minor scales. That is what we'll cover in our next lesson. Until then, thanks for taking the time to watch. I really appreciate it. Take care.